maybe getting...
You can't always.
This is the depth.
Remarkably
Turn back towards God. Rise up.
Hello and welcome to Found by Shalom World. I'm your host from Ireland, Katie Asco. On this show, I talk to guests about their journey into the Catholic faith and how that inspires the work they do now. Through their various ministries and lines of work, our guests are paving the way for the Catholic Church in the 21st century. They're rethinking mission, revamping ministry, and as a result, reaching the hearts and minds of thousands of people. Today we're speaking with J.M. Boyd, president of Glass Canvas. Glass Canvas is a strategic communications and marketing agency that works with faith-based organizations. They've recently launched a product for dioceses and parishes called Tilma, and J.M.'s going to tell us all about that today, as well as his story of faith, his dramatic shift in career, and all the other ways that God is using him and his talents to make an impact on the life of the church. I hope you enjoy our conversation with JM, and welcome to Found. JM, it's great to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So where are you joining us from? Is that home? Is it office?
This is office. This is Glass Canvas HQ.
Very good, very good. And are we allowed to know where that's based, or is that top secret?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, not at all. We're just outside Vancouver, British Columbia. So nice. Just about a 40-minute drive outside the city.
Awesome. And I guess we're going to talk about your story today. I know you have a lot going on with work, your work with Glass Canvas, and you've launched Tilma. So we will be getting into that in some detail in just a moment. But first I want to hear about you, Jay. I want to hear about your background. So can you tell us, where do you come from? What was your upbringing like? And I guess also, why are you Catholic?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have a very unusual upbringing. At least I realized when I moved out at 18 that my upbringing was unusual. I didn't really put it together until then. So I was born in Germany, son of some missionaries, basically. And then spent most of my life in Hawaii, but I traveled quite a bit in between the ages of 5 and 18. So I'll come back around to that. So my parents were at the early stages of a group called Youth with a Mission, which is a non-denominational missionary organization that they helped found. And shortly after university, they graduated university in California from Bethany Bible College. Myself and all my siblings were born either in northern or southern Germany. But when you say missionary kid, immediately what comes to mind is usually, living with a tribe somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. That was not quite my upbringing. My parents ended up being more consultants or trainers for missionaries and mission activities. So they ended up traveling quite a bit. After their time in Germany, they founded sort of a university that was attached to the missions organization. So I both lived on that campus and then traveled with my folks, usually to third world countries. So whenever I play the game, I don't know if you've ever played the game Two Truths and a Lie. My favorite one to use is that by the time I was 18, I had been to 98 countries. And that sounds like a lie, but it was sort of a weird factoid about my life. So I've been a lot of places, and I didn't realize that was weird until I moved out on my own.
Sure, everyone goes to 98 countries.
Yeah, exactly.
That's normal.
I actually one of my, where I feel this, people laugh at me because I feel really safe and comfortable on a plane, which is not the normal experience for most.
No, not quite. And at what stage of this were you Catholic? And when did your faith become important to you? Because in our off-camera chat, I think you said you were a missionary kid, but not what you would expect. So I wonder what you were referring to by that.
Well, I understood who Jesus was. I went through an experience after I left home. Part of my journey took me to Bosnia after I left home, and Turkey and a few other places. And while I was in Bosnia, it was really when things started to sort of open up for me. And really, it came about from, spending time in Ephesus, spending time in Bosnia, and I was working with an NGO and a missions organization while I was there doing reconciliation. So we got to spend time with the head imam and mufti of the Islamic faith in Sarajevo, and the rabbi, as well as the priests. These three different cultures that sort of struggled to get along in a number of different ways. And in my own faith, I started noticing incongruencies with what I believed or what I taught. And I think I'd always struggled with this around, different concepts within faith, within my Protestant upbringing. My grandfather was an Assemblies of God pastor. My dad was an ordained Assemblies of God pastor, but never pastored a church. And that upbringing didn't really jive with what I was experiencing in life. At one point I was hanging out with a bunch of Messianic Jews, and that felt like, okay, well, this has got to be the closest thing to what, the disciples practiced. And I'm not an academic by any stretch. I'm an experience-based learner. So it was more about living in that world. And at one point, someone introduced me to a Catholic priest, actually an Irish Catholic priest who was living in Bosnia and had been since the war. And we just ended up hanging out, sitting down, having a beer at least 2 or 3 times a week. And he allowed me to ask every question I had. The questions that never had good answers from the pastors I had been around with, or, because the Bible says so is not really enough of an answer for me. I wanted more, and no one could really give me it, or if they could, the next person would contradict it. And that didn't feel right. So with this priest, it was amazing. I'd ask a question. If he didn't know what the church taught about it, he'd say, let me get back to you. And he'd go and find me something printed off and bring it to me. And I could read through. And that, I was introduced to Humana Vitae that way. I was introduced to all these concepts, all this teaching, all this history that I didn't know existed. So that really started a 4-year sort of journey for me. And in the process there, I ended up getting married, moving back to Hawaii for a time being, and as my wife and I, unbeknownst to me, my wife's family was going through a similar journey. Her sister had taken a course, had signed up for a course on early church history at the local university. And little did she know, the course was actually taught at this tiny little Catholic college. It used to be called Redeemer Pacific College, and now it's called Catholic Pacific College. And she didn't know that, so she walked into this classroom at this little farmhouse, and that started her journey. A number of years later, she came into the church, came into full communion with the church, and when she started talking to my wife and I about it, everything just sort of clicked together. It was almost like someone turned on a switch and said, you're not going to offend anyone, or you're not going to hurt anyone if you become Catholic. It's not like you're denying your father's faith. And I think, a little while after that, we were pregnant with our first child, and we entered RCIA. My oldest daughter likes to say she became Catholic before us because she was baptized before Easter. So that's her claim to fame.
Wonderful. And I want to get on to your career as well, because I think a lot of the fruits of your Catholic faith have come through the work that you now do and have been doing for quite a while. But something really interesting, at least I think is quite interesting, happened right before you started with Glass Canvas, which is where you are now. You had this really successful career in marketing. You're just in a really good spot, doing very well for yourself. And you ended up walking away from it all. Can you just tell us briefly what that story is? Why did you leave such a great job, and what did life look like in between that and where you are now with Glass Canvas?
Sure. Well, I think it was a buildup of a number of things, but there was a period of time in particular. I don't know if I'd call it a really successful career, but I was definitely on my way up a certain ladder. I could see sort of where it was going. And I had studied photography, and sort of by working with NGOs and nonprofits and having that upbringing and then studying sort of media arts, I worked with professional photographers, which introduced me to agencies and marketing agencies, and that sort of grew my career as sort of the guy you would call if you had a project that included, especially a faith-based nonprofit, or any nonprofit, sort of the translator. And I was sort of climbing the ladder in that world, and I remember one time being, invited into a conversation for a client that as it got along, I realized this is completely against my moral beliefs. Like I can't just do this, and realized that as I joined into this world and as I was climbing up this ladder, I'd face this over and over again, and it didn't feel right to just help someone sell more product or help someone literally change a mind that in a direction I didn't want it to be changed or didn't align with what I believed. And I couldn't find a way out of that. So, while probably burning some bridges, and this coincided with sort of a life event for us where I was working with a gentleman and we were doing, some amazing projects. But at the same time, my brother-in-law was living in New Mexico and had a baby that was born with a terminal illness. And I walked out, essentially, of what I was doing, and walked away from it. And it took a little sabbatical, if you will. My wife and I packed our car and our one child, and we moved down to New Mexico to be with them because they had no family there, and walked through that situation with them. And after that, I just couldn't go back to it. But I also, I'd sort of burned bridges in the process because it was just so disgusting to me in some ways. So I spent a number of years running away from it. 6 or 7 years doing everything from shucking oysters at an oyster bar to, working at a boutique hotel and developing marketing and catering plan for them, and working for the government of Canada, producing sort of how rural areas can use social media. This is back in the days when social media was just sort of starting. And until along came these young guys who told me they had started about 12 months earlier and wanted to develop an agency that only took on work for the church. And, my first instinct really was, there's not a market for that, can't happen. They won't pay what needs to be done to do it right. And Jason, one of my business partners now, had a moment in his life at Easter, I think it was, where he felt like God said, do it until you can't do it anymore. Just try. And so he invited me into that. And as well as another gentleman, one of my other business partners. So there's 4 of us that started Glass Canvas with the intention of doing the best quality work we could to serve the gospel and to serve the church. The idea being that, isn't the gospel worth it? We downplay it so much. And that started the journey of Glass Canvas.
Yeah, I love it. And you guys have done great work. I've seen a lot of the projects that you've worked on, and thankfully there really is a market for these kinds of things. And ministries, when they see their potential and they're willing to invest in, strategy and marketing, it's just amazing, what they can do. And you guys have helped them do just incredible work. So that's been amazing to see Glass Canvas grow over these last 9 years. But tell us about what you're doing now. You've launched this product called Tilma. What is that about?
Sure. Yeah, I think this is one of the most exciting things I've ever been a part of. I'd say about 5 or 6 years ago, unbeknownst to us, we started developing product. It started with different software products, different sort of pieces of the puzzle And we didn't really know exactly what we had until it was obvious, looking back now, that God's hand was in it all the way through. That, we worked with one client who wanted us to produce this piece, and another client who wanted us to produce this piece, and we could combine those together and give them to the next client who couldn't afford it. And this just kept happening over and over again. And then we were invited to work with an amazing team in Detroit, at the Diocese of Detroit, on a project called Unleash the Gospel. And that sort of unlocked some of the strategy. Yeah, thanks. They're an incredible team, and we got to be a part of helping with the strategy and the brand for that. And then they have just taken it to places that I couldn't even imagine could happen at a diocese, to be honest. And by seeing some of that, it unlocked a few of the strategic pieces for us. So what Tilma came into being was a product, but also with the right tools. I'll tell you I'll give you a story of how it works, because that's probably easiest. Yeah. We all have this experience of we use it in a video of a girl named Kate. Someone like Kate. Mm-hmm. Kate goes to mass occasionally, and all of a sudden, Kate gets engaged, and she goes to her parish, and she says, "I want to get married. What's the steps I need to take here?" That's a piece of information. We now know her age, we have her email address, we know her fiance's email address, his age, when they're getting married. All this information can help us serve them. We've all had the experience of picking up a bulletin or getting an email from the diocese or the parish, and it doesn't feel like any of it is relevant to us. And that starts us subconsciously thinking, this isn't for me. But what if we could give Kate and her fiance information that's based around the age and the stage of their life and their felt needs and what they're interested in? Then if every piece of information they're receiving is along those lines, it helps them to feel cared for, loved, and seen. In some research, the reality is that parishioners often feel closer to the community at their gym or at their other community organizations than they do at their parish. And that's often because we're trying to be everything to everyone, and in the process, you're everything to no one. And we're not trying to create software that does the job for us. We're trying to get the tools to make the job easier and more relevant. So we can actually introduce them so that they can actually meet in person and start sort of this mentor relationship to guide Kate, who's now been through this journey on her own and her husband, into a journey of becoming a disciple, and from there becoming a missionary disciple herself to draw others in.
Yeah, well, that makes so much sense. And it sounds like Tilma is unlike anything else that's ever existed before. So it's a very exciting tool for the church. And I know you have some news. I don't know if you can share it about Tilma, something that's kind of new. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's actually 6 different products in Tilma. So there's 5 products that are focused on the diocese that help everyone who's doing evangelistic work in every office or in the community, apostolates and different groups around them, to all work together to connect people to the right thing at the right time. But one of the core pieces is we have to gather all this information from somewhere, and that usually happens at the parish. So there's Tilma Parish is a fully featured church management software built from the ground up with a parish in mind. So it wasn't built for a Protestant church and then reorganized for parishes. It's built for the parish with the parish in mind from the get-go. So it does everything from all your email, campaigns, donations, receipting, sacramental data collection, and it gives this opportunity for everyone, every small ministry in the parish to have their own space as well. Youth ministry, Knights of Columbus, or whatever organization you may have. So that is available to any parish to jump on board and use license free. So no cost to them. We want to make it as easy as possible for parishes and parishioners to care and love for the people in their pews and outside the pews.
Amazing. And I know there's so much more to Tilma, and I wish we could just talk and talk and talk, but unfortunately we are running out of time. So where can people go to find Tilma and Glass Canvas and all these things we've been talking about?
Sure. Well, you can go to tilmaparish.com or tilmaplatform.com to see all the pieces. And you can sign up for a demo there or join the mailing list and see what everything new is coming out. And we update on a regular basis, and new features are coming out all the time. And then as well, you can, if you want to look at some of what we've done as an agency and what we're continuing to do there, you can look at glasscanvas.io.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, JM, for joining us today and the incredible work you're doing for the church. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
God bless. We were here with JM Boyd of Glass Canvas here on Shalom Worlds Found. Until next time, take care.
At the end of Mass, we are told to go out and bring the gospel into our lives and witness to the gospel by everything that we say and do. It's so important that we are all out there bringing the joy of the gospel to everyone we know. And that's why I'm so pleased to endorse and offer my blessing to Shalom World TV for all that you are doing to bring good news into this world which is often sad and dark and in need of a message of hope. Thank you for what you're doing. May God bless your work always.